Lysander Moreau thought he had mastered the art of deception, weaving a life of power, wealth, and control. Seraphina Moreau, his devoted wife, had once believed in the perfect world he built for her, until she uncovered the ultimate betrayal, as his pregnant wife plotted a quiet, devastating revenge, and his mistress Ophelia Vance turned against him. Lysander's empire began to crumble. What started as a carefully crafted double life would soon unravel into financial ruin, legal downfall, and a public disgrace that no amount of money could fix. Lysander Vaughan was a man who had everything. With a net worth stretching into the billions, he moved through life with the confidence of someone untouchable. His business empire spanned industries, real estate, tech, luxury goods, each one feeding into his ever-growing fortune. He was admired, respected, even feared in certain circles. But to the outside world, the most enviable part of his life was his marriage to Seraphina Vaughan. Seraphina was the perfect wife. With a striking beauty that turned heads and an elegance that never seemed forced, she complemented Lysander in every way. She had once been a successful fashion designer, but after marrying him, she stepped back from her career to focus on building a family. For years, their marriage appeared flawless, an image polished through high-profile events, charity galas, and carefully curated social media glimpses. But underneath the surface, the foundation of their relationship had started to crack. Seraphina was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a long-awaited milestone that she had dreamed about since their wedding day. She imagined a blissful future, raising their child together, strengthening their bond, and solidifying their place as a power couple. But as her pregnancy progressed, she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut. Something had shifted in Lysander. At first, the signs were subtle. His business trips became more frequent, his explanations for late-night meetings more vague. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at her had dulled, replaced with something distant. She brushed it off at first, blaming stress, exhaustion, the pressures of running an empire. Yet, the changes only grew more obvious. Strange charges appeared on their financial statements. Luxury hotel stays in cities he never mentioned traveling. 2. Expensive jewelry from boutiques she had never set foot in. Private jet expenses unaccounted for in his usual itinerary. When she asked, he dismissed her concerns with effortless charm, reminding her of how busy he was, how complicated business had become. She wanted to believe him, but doubt had already taken root. One evening, while Lysander was away on another business trip, Seraphina sat alone in their penthouse, staring at the city skyline. A nagging thought kept repeating in her mind. What if he was lying? She reached for her laptop, heart pounding, and began searching through their financial records. The deeper she dug, the more uneasy she became. Money was being moved in ways that didn't make sense. Large transfers funneled into accounts she didn't recognize. Property investments under names she had never seen before. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through pages of documents. This wasn't just a case of her husband spending frivolously. Something was being hidden from her. The realization sent a chill through her spine. She needed to know the truth. Seraphina hired a private investigator the next day, a discreet professional known for uncovering the darkest secrets of the elite. Days passed in agonizing silence, each moment filled with anxiety. When the report finally arrived, she felt her stomach twist as she opened it. The pages laid out the truth in cold, undeniable detail. Lysander had been living a double life. He wasn't just having an affair. He had married another woman, a woman named Ophelia Cade. Seraphina stared at the photos included in the report. Ophelia was young, breathtakingly beautiful, and heavily pregnant. The shock sent her reeling. Lysander had stood by her side, kissed her forehead, rested his hand on her belly as he spoke of their future, all while knowing he had already given another woman the same promises. The betrayal was more than personal. It was calculated, ruthless. He had built a separate life, siphoned money into accounts meant to sustain his mistress, and taken vows he had no right to make. Seraphina's body shook as she tried to process the enormity of it. Her fairy tale life had been an illusion. Her husband, the man she had trusted with everything, had lied to her in the worst way imaginable. But as the shock wore off, a new emotion took its place. It burned in her chest, stronger than grief, stronger than pain. It was rage. Lysander had made the mistake of underestimating her. He thought she would be blind, too distracted by her pregnancy to see what was happening right under her nose. He was wrong, and he was about to pay for it. Seraphina felt as if the walls of her world were closing in. The betrayal was unbearable, but she refused to let it consume her. She would not be the humiliated wife who stood by and watched as her husband deceived her. Instead, she would be the one who dictated the consequences of his actions. She took a deep breath, pushing past the pain, and focused on what needed to be done. She spent the next several days gathering as much information as possible, combing through bank statements, real estate transactions, and legal documents. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. Lysander had spent months orchestrating this deception. He had purchased a mansion for Ophelia in an exclusive gated community under the name of a shell corporation. He had transferred millions of dollars into offshore accounts, ensuring his mistress and their unborn child would be financially secure. Everything had been done in secret, carefully hidden from Seraphina. But he had been careless. He believed his wealth and influence would protect him. He underestimated her ability to fight back. She wasn't just a wife. She was a woman who had built herself into the perfect partner for a man like him, learning every trick and strategy of the powerful. And now, she was about to turn those lessons against him. She made no sudden moves. Instead, she played the role of the oblivious, devoted wife. She still smiled at public events, still placed her hand over her belly when reporters asked about the baby, still let him kiss her cheek when cameras flashed. Lysander had no idea that behind her poised exterior, she was dismantling his empire piece by piece. She started by securing her own wealth. Over the years, Lysander had insisted on joint accounts and financial control. But Seraphina had kept a private trust in her name, a small fortune that had grown from investments she made long before marriage. She moved more funds into it, ensuring he could not access a single dollar. Next, she arranged meetings with the top legal minds in the city, crafting a divorce strategy that would leave him crippled. But financial ruin was not enough. She wanted him to feel the same devastation she had felt when she read that report. Seraphina reached out to powerful allies, business executives, journalists, and even law enforcement officials who had long watched Lysander with suspicion. With the right incentives, they were more than willing to help. She gathered evidence of his fraudulent financial dealings, the hidden accounts, and the illegal tax evasions that could bring his empire crashing down. She knew he had enemies, rivals, waiting for an opportunity to strike. She would be the one to hand them the ammunition. At the same time, she continued to monitor Ophelia. The young woman was blissfully unaware of the storm coming. She had no idea that Seraphina knew everything. No idea that the luxurious life she had been promised was built on a crumbling foundation. Lysander had made her believe she was special, that she had won over the powerful billionaire. But she was nothing more than another pawn in his game. Seraphina found herself wondering what Ophelia truly knew. Had she known Lysander was married when she fell into his arms? Had she believed his lies about an unhappy marriage, about a neglected husband looking for love elsewhere? Or had she knowingly taken part in the deception, enjoying the wealth and privileges that came with being the secret mistress of a billionaire? It didn't matter now. Seraphina wasn't just going after Lysander. Ophelia's world would also crumble. Every night, she lay in bed next to her husband, pretending to be asleep as he scrolled through his phone, likely messaging Ophelia. Every morning, she kissed him goodbye, knowing that soon he would have no idea what hit him. The plan was in motion. Lysander had shattered her trust, broken their vows, and built an entire second life behind her back. Now he would pay the price. Seraphina moved with calculated precision. She had spent years watching Lysander navigate the world of power, wealth, and deception, and now she was using every lesson he had unknowingly taught her. There was no room for mistakes. Every move had to be deliberate, every action carefully measured. Revenge was not about anger, it was about destruction. And when it was done, there would be nothing left of the life Lysander had so arrogantly built for himself. The first step was isolating him financially. While he had always assumed full control over their shared accounts, Seraphina had been patient, quietly maneuvering herself into a position of strength. She had studied the fine print of every contract, memorized the structure of his business dealings, and built relationships with key financial players who held the true power behind his empire. Now, she was ready to strike. She called in favors from trusted allies in the banking world. Accounts that Lysander believed were secure were flagged for audit. Offshore transfers he had made to protect his secret life were placed under scrutiny, with government agencies suddenly expressing a keen interest in his financial activity. His investments, once flourishing, began to show signs of instability as whispers of potential fraud spread among business circles. At the same time, she activated her legal team. Divorce was inevitable, but she refused to let it be on his terms. The prenuptial agreement he had once forced her to sign, believing it would protect his fortune, contained loopholes he had overlooked. With evidence of his secret marriage to Ophelia, Seraphina's lawyers had grounds to challenge the contract entirely. Infidelity, financial misconduct, and fraudulent dealings gave her the upper hand. But she didn't stop there. She wanted more than just his money. She wanted to dismantle his public image. Lysander thrived on the illusion of control, the belief that he was untouchable. She knew that reputation was more valuable than wealth to men like him. So, she reached out to the media. Anonymous leaks began to surface. Reports of his double life circulated among journalists, with photographs of Lysander and Ophelia appearing in tabloid headlines. Business articles speculated on his financial troubles, questioning the stability of his empire. Investors panicked, stock prices fluctuated, and shareholders demanded answers. The pressure mounted, forcing him into damage control. Lysander had no idea where the attacks were coming from. His mind raced to find a scapegoat, a jealous competitor, a bitter former associate, even political adversaries. He never once suspected that the woman sleeping beside him was orchestrating his downfall. While he scrambled to contain the damage, Seraphina made her next move. She had been watching Ophelia closely, studying her patterns, learning her weaknesses. The young mistress lived in blissful ignorance, enjoying the luxuries Lysander provided without a care. But Seraphina was about to change that. She arranged for an anonymous package to be delivered to Ophelia's home. Inside were legal documents exposing Lysander's marriage, financial records proving he had tied his fortune to Seraphina, and evidence that his promises to Ophelia were nothing more than lies. Alongside them was a letter, simple but devastating. Lysander never intended to leave his wife. He had married Ophelia in secret, not out of love, but out of greed and arrogance, believing he could control two women at once. But now, everything was falling apart. And when it did, Ophelia would be left with nothing. The fallout was immediate. Ophelia confronted Lysander in a furious rage, shattering the illusion he had worked so hard to maintain. The trust between them crumbled. He had expected Seraphina to be the helpless victim, never considering that his mistress could turn against him as well. But Seraphina wasn't finished yet. The final blow was yet to come. Lysander's world was unraveling faster than he could control. His once flawless image as a powerful billionaire, respected entrepreneur, and devoted husband had crumbled into a scandalous mess. Everywhere he turned, there was another problem, demanding his attention. Investors were backing out, the media was relentless, and his businesses were suffering from the storm of bad publicity. But the worst part, the part that made his stomach twist with dread, was the betrayal from within. Ophelia had turned on him, The woman he had once promised a future now despised him. The carefully constructed fantasy he had built for her had shattered the moment she received the package. She had packed her things, left the mansion he had gifted her, and vanished. But not before taking everything she could. Luxury jewelry, expensive cars, and, most damaging of all, copies of financial documents she had stolen from his office. She had taken them straight to a lawyer, seeking restitution for being deceived into an illegal marriage. Lysander tried to contain the damage, but it was too late. Legal battles loomed on the horizon, threatening to expose every hidden transaction, every underhanded deal he had ever made. But Ophelia's departure was just the beginning of his troubles. Seraphina had been waiting for this moment. She had spent weeks crafting the perfect final move, ensuring that when Lysander fell, he would have nothing left to stand on. She had already taken control of their financial situation, redirecting assets and freezing accounts before he even realized what was happening. Now she was ready for the final blow, the one that would leave him truly ruined. She filed for divorce in the most public way possible. A high-profile legal team announced her case, releasing statements that painted her as the wronged wife, betrayed and humiliated by the man she had once trusted. The media latched onto the story instantly, turning it into the scandal of the year. News outlets ran exposés on Lysander's double life, dissecting his secret marriage, his financial misdeeds, and his reckless arrogance. As the court proceedings began, Seraphina demanded everything: half of his wealth, full custody of their unborn child, the estate, the private jets, the cars. Everything Lysander had spent his life building was now on the table, and she was taking it piece by piece. But money wasn't the only thing she wanted. She wanted his legacy erased. She reached out to former business partners and industry moguls, ensuring that his name became poison in the corporate world. Every deal he tried to secure fell apart. Board members of his companies began to question his leadership, and soon whispers of a hostile takeover spread through his empire. The same people who had once admired and envied him were now watching, waiting for him to collapse entirely. But the final and most personal strike came when she exposed his darkest secrets to the authorities. Years of financial fraud, tax evasion, and illegal dealings were laid bare before investigators. The offshore accounts he had so carefully hidden were traced, the shell corporations uncovered, the money laundering schemes dissected. He was no longer just a man facing divorce. He was a man facing criminal charges. Lysander was drowning, and no one was coming to save him. His high-powered lawyers fought desperately to keep him out of prison, but the evidence was overwhelming. His assets were frozen, his business partners abandoned him, and his once loyal employees fled, leaving him with nothing but the wreckage of his own arrogance. Seraphina watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. The man who had betrayed her, the man who had humiliated her, was now nothing more than a disgraced figure clinging to the remnants of his former life. He had underestimated her. He had believed she would cry, beg, and plead for his love. Instead, she had taken everything from him, but she wasn't done yet. The final move was still to come. Lysander had once believed himself untouchable. He had spent years building his empire, surrounding himself with power, and ensuring that he controlled every aspect of his life. But now, standing in the ruins of everything he had created, he realized just how wrong he had been. The walls were closing in, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The court had ruled in Seraphina's favor. The divorce settlement stripped him of half his fortune, forcing him to liquidate assets to meet the financial demands. His sprawling estate, his private jets, his fleet of luxury cars, all gone. His name was blacklisted in elite business circles, his reputation permanently stained by the scandal that had exposed his fraudulent dealings and betrayal. Investors who had once fought for his attention now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a man whose empire was crumbling. But worse than the financial ruin was the legal battle that followed. The authorities had been relentless in their pursuit, uncovering a web of deceit that went deeper than even Seraphina had anticipated. His offshore accounts, hidden transactions, and years of tax evasion had finally caught up with him. The media had already painted him as a corrupt businessman, but now the evidence confirmed it. He faced charges of fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct, crimes that carried heavy sentences. His legal team scrambled for a defense, but the damage was irreversible. His assets were frozen, leaving him unable to fund the high-powered lawyers who had once protected him from consequences. His former allies distanced themselves, fearing that any association with him would bring their own dealings under scrutiny. The people he had once controlled, the ones who had followed his orders without question, had turned their backs on him. Meanwhile, Seraphina flourished. She had taken her settlement and reinvested wisely, securing a future for herself and the child she carried. She no longer lived under the shadow of Lysander's control. She was free, powerful in her own right, and in complete control of her destiny. The humiliation and betrayal she had suffered had been repaid in full. She had taken everything from him, not just his wealth, but his power, his influence, and his pride. Lysander, now reduced to a mere shadow of the man he once was, found himself truly alone. Ophelia had disappeared completely, wanting nothing to do with the disgrace that followed him. His former friends abandoned him, unwilling to risk their own reputations. His company was seized by creditors, his assets auctioned off to pay for the lawsuits piling against him. As the final blow, the court found him guilty of financial crimes. The judge handed down a harsh sentence, ensuring that Lysander would spend years behind bars. The media frenzy surrounding his downfall reached its peak as he was escorted away in handcuffs, his once pristine designer suit now wrinkled and stained with the sweat of desperation. The cameras captured every moment, broadcasting his disgrace to the world. Seraphina watched the news coverage in silence, her hands resting on the swell of her pregnant belly. She had won, not just in court, not just financially, but in every way that mattered. She had been the woman Lysander underestimated, the wife he had betrayed and discarded for a fantasy. But in the end, she had outplayed him. There was no sympathy for him, no regret, no second thoughts. He had built his life on deception and arrogance, believing himself invincible. But now, stripped of everything, he was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a man who had everything, only to lose it all to the one person he never saw coming. Seraphina took a deep breath, feeling the steady rhythm of her unborn child. The past was behind her. The future was hers to shape. And Lysander? He was nothing more than a name that the world would soon forget.